Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. Today, we're diving into what is arguably the defining global challenge of the 21st century. But we're going to completely reframe how you think about it. For a moment, I want you to forget about just saving the trees. Today, we're exploring climate change as the ultimate threat multiplier. It is a massive, overarching crisis that literally touches absolutely everything we do.
So, let me ask you this. Is climate change strictly an environmental issue? When you hear those words, you're probably picturing melting ice caps, or maybe some unpredictable weather patterns, right? But what if it goes so much deeper than that? What if it's actually a hardline, urgent matter of national security and economic survival? Well, the reality of what we're dealing with is profound.
Just to set the baseline here, before we map out the impacts, let's define what we're actually talking about. Climate change simply means long-term shifts in the Earth's temperatures and weather patterns. Now, sure, the Earth's climate does shift naturally over very long periods, but the rapid warming we're seeing right now, that is driven by human activities. We're pumping greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, creating this giant invisible blanket that traps heat and cranks up the global temperature. That is the greenhouse effect in a nutshell.
So, where exactly are all these gases coming from? Honestly, it's a bit daunting because the causes are completely baked into our everyday lives. It's the fossil fuels, the coal, oil, and gas we burn for power and transport. It's the rapid urbanization and industrial pollution replacing the forests that would normally absorb that carbon. It even extends to our agriculture, with livestock releasing massive amounts of methane gas and the way we just systematically mismanage our plastic waste.
And all those human activities pumping gases into the air, they don't just make things a little bit warmer. They trigger a domino effect. We're talking about a devastating cascade of consequences that rip right through the very pillars of human society.
Imagine a three-pronged attack on modern life. First, you have the environmental impact. Rising temperatures, melting glaciers, and freak weather events completely destroying biodiversity. Second, the economy takes a massive hit. Those extreme weather events cause widespread crop failures, they shatter our roads and bridges, and they skyrocket the cost of disaster management, wiping out people's livelihoods overnight. And third, public health. We're suddenly battling deadly heat waves, choking on severe air pollution, and facing spikes in mosquito-borne diseases, all while dealing with serious food and water shortages.
Now, this crisis doesn't hit the entire globe evenly. Let's zoom in from that macro perspective for a second, because some nations are standing directly on the front lines right now. India is one of those nations, currently standing as one of the most severely affected countries on the planet.
Across India, the disruptions are incredibly severe and tangible. You have the melting Himalayan glaciers, which directly threaten major life-sustaining river systems. Irregular monsoons are just devastating agricultural yields for farmers who depend on them. We're seeing record-breaking brutal heat waves across multiple states. Meanwhile, coastal areas are getting battered by much stronger cyclones, and regions like Assam and Bihar are facing repetitive, devastating floods. And underpinning all of this is a growing nationwide water scarcity. These aren't just statistics, these are extreme events upending millions of lives.
This reality forces a massive shift in how we look at the world. For decades, we've treated this strictly as an environmental issue, something for ecologists to worry about. But the reality is far, far more severe. Climate change is a hardline national security concern.
Think of it as a true security threat multiplier. Extreme weather creates severe resource scarcity. And that scarcity, it breeds intense pressure on food and water, which then ignites regional disputes and drives mass migration. When whole communities are displaced or hit by massive disasters, it demands immediate, large-scale relief operations and direct, heavy involvement from the armed forces. Future military and government leaders aren't just going to be fighting traditional conflicts. They absolutely have to prepare for climate-driven instability.
Okay, take a breath. It is a dire situation, I know, but we cannot afford to just sit back and be overwhelmed by it. We have to shift our momentum toward the solution. Tackling a threat multiplier of this magnitude requires massive coordinated efforts at the very highest levels. We need a definitive action plan, both from national governments and from the entire global community.
Looking internally, the Indian government is fighting back with some incredibly ambitious steps. They've launched the National Action Plan on Climate Change, as well as Mission Life, which pushes for sustainable living at the citizen level. They're also aggressively scaling up renewable energy, specifically solar and wind, expanding the electric vehicle market, and combating deforestation through widespread tree plantation and afforestation programs. On the diplomatic front, India is even driving the International Solar Alliance to foster green energy cooperation across the globe. But of course, India cannot solve this in a vacuum. Climate change is a global problem, and that absolutely requires a unified global solution through serious treaties and binding commitments. Countries around the world are coming together through major frameworks like the Paris Agreement. They're coordinating through the UN climate conferences, the COPs you hear about on the news, aligning their targets with the Sustainable Development Goals, and increasingly binding themselves to strict net zero emission commitments. International cooperation really is the only way to scale the response.
So we have all these massive international treaties and high-level government initiatives. But I want to break through all that policy jargon for a second and speak directly to you. What can we do? It is incredibly easy to feel totally powerless when you're staring down a global crisis. But the truth is, this massive global strategy actually depends entirely on empowering the individual level. It all starts with practical, daily habits. Simple things: saving electricity, conserving water at home, planting trees, or just opting for public transit and bicycles over personal vehicles whenever you can. It means consciously reducing your plastic use and actively educating your family and your community. Now, alone, these seem like tiny, almost insignificant actions, but adopted by millions of responsible citizens, they compound into a massive, positive global impact.
If you ever feel overwhelmed trying to guide those daily choices, just lean on a proven classic framework, the 3 Rs. Reduce your consumption, reuse whatever you can, and recycle the rest. It's such a simple mindset shift, but it is the absolute engine of everyday sustainability.
To wrap up today's explainer, I want you to consider this powerful quote. The Earth is not inherited from our ancestors, it is borrowed from our future generations. Climate change threatens every single pillar of our society, and while governments and industries absolutely must act, so must we. We have to lead by example to protect our natural resources. So the ultimate question remains: are we going to hand back a depleted, dangerous world to the next generation, or will you start acting today for a more sustainable tomorrow? The choice is entirely yours. Thanks so much for joining me, and I'll catch you next time.